Now there are those who said I'd surely fall when I told them I'd given Jesus my all. And I guess I really can't blame them for having their doubts, for they only knew what I used to be. But oh, what a difference the Lord made in me. What I got was real, and praise God I'm still serving Him now. Forever changed, I'm forever changed. Old things are brand new, I'll tell you it's true. I'm not the same. When He changed the heart of me, He changed my eternal destiny. Old things passed away, thank God for the day my forever changed. Now at this life we're all that He promised to me. Friend, I'd still choose to serve the Lord faithfully, but I cannot begin to imagine what He has in store. For once I was lost, I was headed for hell, but then I got saved, and now all is well. And my forever began when I took the precious hand of Jesus my Lord. Forever changed, I'm forever changed. All things are brand new, I tell you it's true. I'm not the same. When He changed the heart of me, He changed my eternal destiny. Old things passed away, thank God for the day my forever changed. When He changed the heart of me, He changed my eternal destiny. Old things passed away, thank God for the day my forever changed.
All right, thank you for that song, Miss Shirley. The further I get into this lesson tonight, the more we're going to see the stark difference and change that God can make. Who's ready for the pastor to be back? If you were as nervous as me, you'd be ready for him to be back. I know Andrew's ready. He asked me several weeks ago if I didn't mind filling in for him tonight. This is a Wednesday night Bible study. We'll be studying the Word tonight. I immediately began to pray about what to teach tonight, and after about 2 days, this passage here came back to my mind. I had some notes here from this passage. I taught this. It kind of amazed me. I remember Brother Sean being in that class, but I taught from this passage. It's been almost 2 years ago, and so I began to look back at it. It was heavy on my heart. It has been. I began to get some more material that the Lord gave me from it. So if you've got your Bibles, turn to Genesis chapter 14 tonight. Genesis chapter 14. When you're there, put your finger, a bookmarker there, and then turn to Hebrews chapter number 6. When you get to Hebrews 6, put your bookmarker there. We'll be starting in Genesis, but at some point we will be turning to Hebrews chapter 6. It'll just help with time. Not that I want to be here all night or teach all night. The sooner I can get down, the better, but it will help bridge some of the time gap there. All right, if you got your bookmark in Hebrews 6, go back to Genesis 14, and we'll begin reading in verse 1. Genesis 14, verse 1, it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. That's the valley of Siddim. The Salt Sea referred there is the Dead Sea. Skip down to verse number 8. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. They joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and with Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. They took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. They took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner. These were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, pursued them unto Dan. He divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Sheva, which is the king's dale. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was a priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. The king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread, even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So we see this passage here tonight, and we know that Abram in this passage is Abraham. I will find myself saying Abraham a lot tonight, but you know that I'm talking of Abram in the text here. To get to the setting of where we're at right now, we have to understand that Abraham originated in a land called Ur of the Chaldees. It was a land filled with idolatry and witchcraft. God called Abraham and Sarah out of Ur of the Chaldees to the land that he promised. He called them out, and Abraham was saved. And we're told in Genesis chapter 9 that his nephew Lot left Ur of the Chaldees with him. Lot, his nephew, traveled out. They come to a place called Bethel. We're told that Abraham builds an altar at Bethel. Famine and drought strike the land of Bethel in Genesis chapter 10, and we see Abraham leave and take his family down into Egypt to find provision for food and water. We know that that was the wrong decision to make, but who could blame him at the time? He was just trying to find food and water for his family. We're told in that passage that Lot goes down into Egypt with Abraham and Sarah. Most of you know the story. Abraham gets in trouble with Pharaoh while he's in Egypt. He tells some lies regarding his wife Sarah. He says that Sarah is his sister instead of his wife. To make a long story short, it makes Pharaoh upset, so he sends Abraham back out of Egypt. The Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 10 that Abraham returns back to Bethel. It specifically says that he returns back to the same altar that he built in Bethel before leaving. They all return there. Lot comes back there with him. Genesis chapter 13, we see that there is strife between Abraham and Lot, specifically between the herdsmen of Abraham's herdsmen and of Lot's herdsmen. We know that they are crowded in the plains and the field there. There is strife between the herdsmen, and Abraham gives Lot the decision. He tells Lot to look either way that he can look. he tells Lot to pick the land of the plain that he wants his herd and he wants to settle. And Lot says, once you've picked your spot, I'll take my spot and go elsewhere. We know that Lot, in chapter 13, in verse 10, that as Lot looks around, he sees the land of surrounding Sodom and Gomorrah, and he describes it as being likened to the land of Egypt. He remembers that whatever he's looking at, that land there, reminds him of being the same appearance of the land of Egypt that he was there, and that's the land that Lot picks. We're told that he pitches his tent towards Sodom in verse 12 of chapter 13. What we have here is the situation that comes about. Lot is now living in Sodom. He's not just living on the outskirts, he's living in Sodom. And Will, if you'll go with the first slide now. I made this first slide about as clear as mud for you because there's a lot going on in this chapter. Okay? If you look at the top left category, we see these four kings, the nations that they represent. They come against the top right category of these five kings. You have four kings come against these five, like chapter 14 tells us. Our focus will be mainly on the first king on the top right category, is the king of Sodom, that is Bera. Okay? That is where Lot lives. That is the king that Lot pledges allegiance to. That is the king of the land of Sodom where he lives. Those four kings come up against those five kings. They defeat those five kings. We're told that that battle takes place in the valley of Siddim, there at the Dead Sea, which is the Salt Sea, which is the Dead Sea. Okay? When those four kings defeat those five kings, they have now captured Lot and all his possessions. Okay? That's a problem because that is Abraham's family, that's Abraham's nephew, and Abraham doesn't take too kindly to his nephew being captured. He doesn't like Lot being in Sodom no more than what it already is, and now he's being captured and taken even further away. So Abraham gathers together 318 trained men of his household, nothing more than just common folks. They arm themselves. He also goes to the companies of Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. The Bible tells us they're confederate with him, which means they are of his type. They are friends of his. They go and track down the four kings in the top left that have defeated these four kings, and I'll have Lot and all of his possessions in their hands. Abraham and the 318, we are told, slaughter the four kings and those people, and they're able to rescue Lot. Look at verse 16 of chapter 14. And he brought back, that is Abraham Abraham the context, he brought back all the goods, also brought again his brother Lot, which is his brother's son, and his goods, the women also, and the people. So what we have, Abraham and these 318 men go kill the four kings and all their soldiers, and they've now rescued Lot, and they have Lot, the people, the women, and the possessions. Those people and those women are everybody else that have also been captured from Sodom and Gomorrah. He had to rescue everybody to make sure that he got his nephew out. Okay? As they come back out, and I can only imagine, the text doesn't tell us where Abraham is going, but if I just went out and fought a battle and had to go somewhere to a far country and fight a battle, I would have home on my mind. So I'm most likely headed back home. In verse 16, Lot and the women and the possessions, everybody from Sodom and Gomorrah and the other places there, are headed back with Abraham. Right here in our text, we are told that there are two people that simultaneously step on the scene, two people that come out and meet Abraham face to face as he's leading this procession of people in verse 16. These two people are Melchizedek and Bera, the king of Sodom. Okay? Melchizedek is a very interesting individual in the Bible. There's not a whole lot said about him, but there's enough said about him to know who he is, and what type he is. Okay? Melchizedek, in the text here in verse 18, is described as being the king of Salem. That is Jerusalem. Back in these times in the Old Testament, it is referred to as Salem. He's the king of Jerusalem. Okay? We are also told at the end of verse 18 that he is the priest of the Most High God. Okay? That is odd because the office of the high priest is not established until Exodus 28. When Moses is on Mount Sinai the second time he's up there, he's getting the 10 Commandments, and he's also getting a whole lot more of the law. And God lays out for Moses in Exodus 28 that there's to be the office of the Most High Priest. And he says, Moses, the Most High Priest is going to be Aaron, your brother. He says, Aaron's going to be the Most High Priest, and he says, he gives him a description of everything that he's going to wear, and he says that lineage is going to stay with Aaron. He says, Aaron, when he dies and follows the next oldest son, which is Abihu, he's going to become the chief high priest in your place. Okay? That's not established to Exodus 28. So how is Melchizedek being described as the king of Jerusalem here, as well as the priest of the Most High God, when that's not even been established yet? Okay? To learn more about Melchizedek and who he is, you're going to have to turn to your bookmarker in Hebrews chapter 6. To get to Hebrews chapter 6, this is the next place in your Bible where you get any more information on Melchizedek. We jump all the way to the New Testament. Look at the last verse of chapter 6, verse 20, and we'll continue into chapter 7 after that. Okay? Chapter 6, verse 20. Whether the forerunner is for us entered, even Jesus, made and high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus is made and high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Okay? For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Okay? There's a lot more in this verse here that's dealing with the law and grace and how Melchizedek is a type of Christ, but we're going to skip down to let's look at verse 8. And here man lie that died received tithes, but there he receiveth them, of whom it is witness that he liveth. And I may so say, Levi also, who receiveth tithe, paid tithes in Abraham, for he was yet in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called under the order of Aaron? Okay, we're made very plain and clear here, back at the end of chapter 6 and the beginning part of chapter 7, and the verses that we just looked at, that there's no need of any other chief priest after the order of Melchizedek. Okay, we're told in verse 3 that Melchizedek was without father, without mother. There's no descent. Okay. In Exodus 28, when the chief priest is established, we know that Aaron is the beginning and the origin of that lineage there. Melchizedek did not have that earthly lineage. We're not given any record of his birth, what lineage he comes from. He just appears on the scene. We're told that his pattern and order is made after Jesus. Okay? The verse 3, but made like unto the Son of God, capital S for Son, capital G for God, abideth a priest continually. Okay? Hebrews makes it very plain and clear. You don't have to make any typology into this. Hebrews tells us that Melchizedek is a type of the Son of God. He's a type of Christ. He is that order of that high priest. There's no beginning with him. We're not told of any end with him. Okay? We're given a few other descriptions of Melchizedek in verse 2. Okay? He is, by interpretation, the king of righteousness, the king of Salem, and the king of peace. So not only is the king of Jerusalem, not only is he this chief of high priest, made after the Son of God, but he's the king of righteousness and he's the king of peace. Keep all those descriptions in your head as we go through this period here. Okay? When Melchizedek appears on the scene before Abraham, Bera, the king of Sodom, also appears simultaneously. Okay? We know a little bit more about who the person of Melchizedek is and who he is. Let's look at his physical description now. To get that, we don't get that in Genesis, but if he's made after the order of the high priest, that description is given first to Moses in Exodus 28, that description. Will, if you'll go with the next slide, please. Okay, Exodus 28 begins to lay out to Moses in very grave detail what his brother Aaron is to wear once he's been ordained as the chief high priest. God goes into a very description. This is as much as that we could get on here. Okay, He has a plate of pure gold around his head. He has a breastplate that is made out of pure gold. There is 12 stones in this breastplate. The 12 stones, the outer perimeter, are lined with onyx stones. We're told that there are sapphire stones in this right here. We're told that there's topaz stones. His outer robe that's to be worn under the breastplate above the waist is to be made out of purple linen. It's supposed to be over a scarlet. It's supposed to be lined by scarlet threads. And again, this isn't the purpose of mine, but I'm trying to put you into your mind tonight what Melchizedek looks like as he's standing here. He has indigo color, which is light color blue, underskirt at the bottom. He has the linen cords around the bottom, ephod. It had to be made out of flax. There's a lot of description here, but this is the best one that I could find. A Google image and then go around and describe to you there, okay? The stones, each of the stones had to have the name of each tribe of Israel put into them. That was on his breastplate as well, okay? So if he's the chief high priest on the scene, made after the order of Aaron, after the order of Christ, the type of Christ without in the beginning, he was wearing this as he's standing there, okay? If you go to the next slide, Will, this is all that bunched down, and now this is going to be our Melchizedek for our lesson tonight. Okay, this is it's the same color, same pattern, just a different image for Melchizedek there. Same stones on his chest for the high priest. So Melchizedek walks out on the scene as Abraham is leading his nephew Lot and everybody else they just rescued out of Sodom. They haven't made it back to his home yet. Again, my assumption would be that's where Abraham's headed and everybody is with him because verse 16 tells us that everybody's with him. Melchizedek appears on the scene. Okay. King Bera also appears on the scene. King Bera is the king of Sodom. To get more of an understanding of Bera, we have to understand the place that he's the king of, that's Sodom. Most of us already know that, but some of us may need a reminder, or maybe you've not heard it before. We know in the Bible that Egypt is a type of the world. We know all the sin that Egypt had. We know of the trouble of many Christians in the Bible that got into after they went down into Egypt, including Abraham. Okay? We know that Sodom takes the sin of Egypt to a whole other level. To this day, Egypt still stands, but Sodom was destroyed by fire and brimstone. That's the level of the severity that Sodom has had in comparison to Egypt. Not saying that any sin is less than any other sin, but Egypt is still a nation today. Sodom no longer exists. God destroyed it with fire and brimstone. Sodom is described in the New Testament as well as in other places of the Old Testament as being rampant in drunkenness, rampant with alcohol drinking, very rampant in illicit narcotics, drugs. It was known for witchcraft, wizardry. It was heavily esteemed in idolatry, and we know today that one of the biggest sins, one of the most common sins of Sodom was homosexuality, gay relationships. That's what ran rampant in Sodom. So although we don't have a lot of a description of the person of Bera, for him to become king of Sodom, he must have approved of all these things that I just described. He became chief of that area. He must have been born and grew up there, became elected king of Sodom. But he didn't have a problem with everything that I just described there. That also describes to you the place that Lot is living at, and this is his king. Okay? So this is what Bera describes. We're told, will you go to the next slide, please, sir? In verse 10, we're given a description of this battle. Okay, I've got the verse up there for you. You can look at it as a rehash of the battle. But those 4 kings come against those 5 kings there around the Dead Sea at the Vale of Siddim, and we're told that they defeated. And verse 10 gives us a description or an indicator of what King Bera was doing and the king of Gomorrah. We don't know about the other kings. Maybe they were killed. We don't know. But King Bera and the king of Gomorrah, they fled the battle. As the battle became heated, as their 4 nations begin to lose, as their 5 nations begin to lose to their 4, which is something I can't get my mind wrapped around, that 4 nations just defeated 5. But as the battle began to get bad, and as they began to lose, Bera flees on foot, and the king of Gomorrah flees. Okay, we're told that as they were running, that they fell. And the Vale of Siddim was full of slime bits, and that they fell there. Okay, most of you know, as you read in other portions of the Old Testament. And as you study other portions of the Old Testament, anytime you read about a battle in the Old Testament anywhere, and you see the phrase fell there, it almost always means that they died. Whether it was Saul when he fell on his sword at the end of the battle there, other places that it'll tell you how many fell there, that they died. Well, we know that that doesn't mean that here because King Bear reappears a few verses later. When it says that the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah fled and fell there, it means they literally fell down in these slime pits. Okay? You can study these slime pits out, and if you go to the next slide, please, Will. Okay, this is one picture here. I like geology. Most people know that I'm a rock person. I like rocks, but this has me stumped, and I can't get into all the scientific part of it because they still can't figure it out to this day. I would encourage you to go on Google and to Google the slime pits and the tar pits and what they even give it its own name because it has its own geology to it. They call it bitumen. And actually, Brother Sean, they actually make bricks from bitumen in that area, and supposedly they're a better brick than you can get anywhere else for masonry. Once you bake it in the sun and bake it in the heat, it's more better brick than any brick that you can get elsewhere in the world. It's the bricks of bitumen. But they're around. You can go on YouTube. I was on YouTube looking around this area. It's so dangerous to the point that the governments of Israel and the governments of Jordan, which are both divided places there around the Dead Sea, they actually have caution signs up, yellow signs with black writing on them, I guess in Arabic or in Hebrew, telling you caution of these slime pits. They're mainly on the south end of the Dead Sea, on the southeastern edge, the southern side, the southwestern edge, and then they come to the western edge a little bit. You can go on Google Earth, on Google Maps, and if you zoom really in, you can actually start to pick up some of it. The geologists can't figure out why and how it all causes it. The Dead Sea, we know the Jordan River runs for miles and miles, and it ends in the Dead Sea, but there's no exit to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea, we know, is very, very high in its amount of salt. It's very salty. There's more salt there than anywhere. You can float without any problem. They say that salt in the Dead Sea helps with skin conditions. I'll tell this real quick. The first time me and Carrie ever went to Atlanta on vacation some years ago, we were in what's the name of that mall? It's the nicest mall Atlanta has. We go about every time we go. We don't really buy nothing in there, but walk around and maybe have a coffee. But it's most malls around here, if it's a nice mall, has a Corvette sitting in it. I mean, this has Maserati sitting in it, Lamborghinis, and that's what you enter to win. But they had a stand, and there was a Jewish man working there. He was a young man. He was probably 22, 23 years old, and he was selling jars of salt from the Dead Sea. He had two vanities set up, and he encouraged both of us to, of course, Carrie was standing looking at him, and her being her, she said, "Sir, are you a Jew?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." And she's like, I've never met a Jew before. And then we had this big talk, and he said, "Yeah, I've been in America just a few months now selling." We had a conversation about Israel and the United States, and he just loved being in America. And he said, you don't know what you have until you leave Israel and come here. And so he had us wash our hands. He gave us regular soap, water, and we washed our hands. And he gave us these paper towels, and we drew our hands off. Then he took a jar of Dead Sea salt out, Brother Elwood, and he took a little bit, and he said, "Now scrub this into your hands until you can't stand it no more." And we scrubbed our hands really, 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 really hard. We went under the sink, turned the sink on, and black dirt and grime just went everywhere. It's amazing what that salt does because it's just stockpiled there. And he says, they send divers down, they send machines down, they bring it up, and it dries, and we sell it. He said because it helps with skin conditions. And so, anyways, I told that. The tar that you see here in this picture, what the geologists say is if you go to the Dead Sea, especially around the southern edge, because that's where what little bit of current it has as the Jordan River from the north comes in, it pushes everything down into the south and southeastern edge and southwestern edge. They say that at the bottom of the Dead Sea, this amount of salt, and with the dirt and the grime and algae and whatever else is down there, when there's seismic tremors and the plates of the earth shift, it will release this tar to the top. They say it will float to the top in spots and speckles. It'll float to the top, acorn size, and sometimes fist size pieces will come to the top. And it'll make its way to the shoreline, and it'll just gather there. It says as there is changes in the water level of the Jordan River, whether it's really, really rainy, and we know that the Jordan River connects all the way up into the inner workings of, they're even around Greece, so there's a lot of snow and stuff up in Russia, and it makes its way down. it causes the Dead Sea to rise, and so as it rises, it pushes this tar out onto the banks, out away from it. And then as the periods of drought come and the dry season comes, the Dead Sea retains its spot, but it leaves this stuff there, and this has been going on for years and years and years. So as you can see where the man's foot is, it is dry and you can walk on. And so you've got this puddle here that has been there, and you've got this small puddle there of this tar pit, and he's demonstrating to these people. And again, I was on YouTube. There's adventurous people that like to hike and go on adventures, and they're going in and around these signs, and they're even describing in English what this is and to be careful. Because at nighttime, you can be walking, you see the ground is solid, and then you step into this slime. When you read the word pits in the text here, my first thought was, it's something that's like a trap pit out of the Swiss Family Robinson. You dig a huge hole and cover it with sticks. That's not necessarily the case. Well, if you go to another slide, you're never going to see any of these pits being really deep. Here's another puddle in and around leaves. You can be walking and step right into it. Next slide, Will, please. You think these are seas here. These are pits of what you just looked at. This is a little more of a Google map image. You're going to see that they're really not that deep. They're more like depressions, ditch depressions that come from the water going back and forth, receding, and the tar pit being there. The next slide, Will. These are some of those comparison to the Jordan River right there next to it. You can see that these are really not that deep, okay? But the king of Sodom is not from around this area, and we're told that the battle takes place at the southern edge of the Salt Sea in our passage. This is where the battle is taking place. As the battle gets bad, him and the king of Gomorrah turn and they begin to run on foot. So they didn't fall into some huge pit that they couldn't get out of. They're merely running. They're on dry, tacky ground, and all of a sudden they hit one of these pits. And with the momentum of the force of them running, your feet stepping into tar, which the Bible describes as slime here, it locks you up, and you just go forward and you fall flat on your face. So when the king of Bera steps on the scene with King Melchizedek in front of Abraham as he's leading the people out, he looks something like this. There you go. You have King Bera standing here. You can go on with the next slide, Will. You have King Melchizedek and you have King Bera standing before Abraham, Lot, and the people of Sodom that he just rescued. Okay? We're getting down to the remainder of the lesson tonight. I wanted to get into your mind what is going on now, because what is going on here is what's going on with each and every person sitting in tonight, whether you're a lost individual or you're saved. Okay? Let's look at the interaction that is being had here. At no point in your text when you read this passage here do you see any word being spoken from Melchizedek to King Bera. You don't see any word being spoken from King Bera to King Melchizedek. You don't see any trading of items. You don't see even so much as a head nod. You don't see either one of them interacting with each other. Each of these people know who they are, who they stand for, who they represent, and which side they're on. But you do see them both interact with Abraham, and this interaction takes place in front of Lot and in front of everybody he just rescued. Okay? The first interaction I want to look at tonight is Abraham. Okay? Melchizedek, we see that the first thing he does in verse 19, we're told that he brings bread and wine. We're not getting into a big study tonight, but we know that is unfermented wine. God would not have the high priest here having fermented wine if he calls unfermented wine strong drink and raging in other places of the Bible. This is unfermented wine. He presents him with that, with bread. He begins to lay this snack of a feast out for Abraham coming back from this battle. He begins to pour his blessings out on Abraham. Okay, we see, blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. Blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. We see that Abraham gives him tithes of all. We saw that in Hebrews as well, that Abraham pays tithes back to Melchizedek. There's a very mutual interaction here between the two. We see then that the king of Sodom begins to speak to Abraham. King Bera says, give me the persons, take the goods to thyself. Before we get any deeper in this lesson tonight, we're going to see that is the main priority that King Bera has. And with King Bera being the king of everything wicked and vile that we just made mention of earlier, there in Sodom, he's the type of Satan tonight. We see King Bera, his first priority here, the first thing that he says to Abraham is he wants the people. He says, take the goods to thyself. What goods is he talking about? Verse 16 says, these are the goods of the people of Sodom that Abraham just rescued. He has the goods with him and everybody else that's coming out. We see that King Bera's priority is he wants the people back. That's the priority of the devil. He also says, you can take the goods to thyself, Abraham. Anything that you want, you can have. Just give me the people back. That is Satan's first priority. He will give you anything as long as he can have you. He will promise you anything as long as he can have you. And we see Abraham's interaction with Melchizedek as well as Bera. The first interaction we see that Abraham has, he sets a very good example for us. He says to the king of Sodom, I've lifted up my hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread even to a shoe latchet, I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. Okay? He says, only that which the young men have eaten, the portion of the men which with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, those three people that were confederate with Abraham, he says, let them take their portion. Abraham says, these three groups of guys here that came with me, they can take whatever portion they want. He says, but I raise my hand to heaven. He says, I don't want so much as a thread or a shoe latchet from you, King Bera. I don't want a solitary thing that you have to offer. Okay? We see that is a good example for us today, that when the devil presents us with something, that we're not to take anything from Sodom. We're not to take anything that the devil offers us. Okay? Because his intentions is although he's going to offer us anything, he wants you. He wants the persons. That's his first and only priority here. You notice that he's not checking on anybody's welfare. He's not checking on anybody that was captured during this battle. He just wants you. Okay? The second thing that I will look at tonight as an example for us here is how Abraham spoke to Bera. I mentioned this in one of my communication lessons I taught already. Everything that Abraham said here, and everything that Abraham said to Bera here is absolutely correct, is absolutely right. He didn't want anything that King Bera had to offer because he knew who King Bera represented, and that was the nation and the people of Sodom and what that came from. Okay? He makes this very big, bold, and open decree in front of everybody. Everybody is watching this, but look at the impact this may have had. What we see here is that he is extremely harsh to Bera when he makes this statement to Bera, and everybody is standing there watching and seeing this. Nothing he said was wrong. Everything he said was right, and it gives us a good example to follow. But let's be mindful of how we interact with these situations in our life that we may be faced, because it may have a negative impact on those that are not saved, those that don't understand who they're with and what they're dealing with as being wrong. Okay? Turn over to chapter 19. Go to Genesis chapter 19, verse 1. This is the first time we see Lot after this interaction tonight. We see Lot here, and the next time we see Lot is chapter 19, verse 1. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. The next time we see Lot in our Bible is in verse 1 of chapter 19, and he's sitting in the gate of Sodom. So that tells me, Brother Andrew, that at this interaction, this meeting place, Lot is standing there. He sees the blessings that Melchizedek pours on his life. He sees the open praise that Melchizedek gives him. He sees the bread and the unfermented wine that he presents Abraham with. He sees the mutual respect that Abraham gives back to Melchizedek. He sees the physical appearance of Melchizedek, and he sees how Bera looks. And what blows my mind, Brother Andrew, is that in this interaction, seeing these two, the next time we see him, he's back in Sodom. He's back in Sodom again. He's back in the same place he was under the leadership of the same king again. Okay? That just perplexes me. That anybody who's standing here seeing these two kings in their current states would make this decision to do this. But folks, it happens all the time. We see this time and time again. You know, why did Abraham put himself in the position he did, fighting the battle that he did, getting his nephew out, laying his life literally on the line to get his nephew out of the possession of the other kings, for him to be on his way back home, to be met here, for his nephew to end up back over here. Abraham understood, Andrew, that his nephew was going through a battle. His nephew was literally in a battle, and he had been captured. Abraham knew that as much as it must have broke his heart, that he went to the end of the earth to get his nephew out, and he knew that the most he could do was to bring his nephew to this decision-making point in his life. Abraham knew he couldn't force him back to the plain of Mamre where he was at. He couldn't force him back to the plain of Mamre where he was living, where he had a second altar built. The plain of Mamre, at that altar, is the altar where Abraham finally receives the promise that he's going to have a son specifically born of Sarah. That's the same plain of Mamre at that altar where Sarah's laughing in the tent and God gives him the promise that at 90 years old you're still going to have a kid. Abraham, although he wants Lot to come back to that same plain of altar where he's at, the most he knows he can do is to get him to this decision-making point in his life. That's why we do what we do as a church. That's why we do what we do as Christians. We can't make anybody come to church. We can't make anybody get saved. But it seems like time and time again in our life, we have lost friends, lost co-workers, lost family members. It seems like every time we turn around, they're in a battle. Carrie's got a good friend right now. It just seems like she's in a battle over and over again. And the further along these battles that she gets into, the further and further into sin she gets, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. I asked Carrie Monday, I said, has she texted or called you yet? And she said, no. Carrie said, I'm afraid to get into any of this drama that's spilling out of this. And I said, Carrie said, I think I'm about ready to cut ties with her. There's just so much drama going on. I don't want to get dragged into the drama. I said, well, don't get dragged into the drama. Stay out of the drama, but you have to stay here and available for her, because as much as you hate to see the situation get worse and worse and worse, you have to be here to get her to this decision-making point. We do what we do, and we go through the battles that we go through, and we put ourselves through the battles like Abraham did in getting his nephew back out of from these other kings back to this point. He can't make him come back to the plain of Mamre and back to that altar, but he can get him to this decision-making point here, and that's the most that he can do. You're not a failure tonight if you can't get your lost friends and your co-workers to church. You're not a failure if you can't get them to make the right decisions anymore. They can't make those decisions until they're saved. But what you can do is to live your life to get them to this point time and time again. A lot of times, if we're out at a restaurant, we'll leave a gospel tract on a table with your tip. And sometimes you see them pick the tract up when you're paying, and they put it in their pocket, and they walk up. And sometimes you see them pick it up, and as they're cleaning the table, you see them put that in the trash. You can't help that, but when they pick that tract up and look at it, for a split second, they're at that decision-making point in their life. As much as you want them to make that right decision, all the thing you can do is to go through the battle to get them to this point here. That's all Abraham could do. Okay? So we see that part there. As much as that applies to lost people, and as much as that applies to people that are not saved, what's even more perplexing, Andrew, is that Lot was a saved man. I'll give you the scripture reference for that. That makes the whole situation even more perplexing. If I'm thinking right, it's in Peter. I want to give you the reference so you can write it down. I see a lot of people taking notes tonight. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. But Andrew, we're told that in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, that Lot's his righteous soul was vexed daily. We're told that his soul was righteous, meaning righteous in his standing with God as being saved, not righteous in his actions. But every day he was vexed. That word vexed means plagued, tormented. It means much agitated. Every day that Lot was living in Sodom, he would wake up and his righteous soul was being vexed. He was being tormented inside. He knew where he was living was wrong. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew that everybody he was associated with was wrong. And with him sitting in the gate in verse 1 of chapter 19, that was a place of leadership. He wasn't just sitting on the gate hanging out there. He was the overseer of who was coming in and going out, making sure there were no spies coming in, making sure you were a citizen or you had passage of right-of-way to get into the town. Every day that he lived there, he knew that his righteous soul was being vexed daily. So that tells me tonight that this isn't just a decision-making point for lost folks. Everybody sitting here tonight, if you start slipping in your life, you need to realize that you're finding yourself falling a slime-covered king, and that's Satan. We know that your righteousness is as filthy rags, which means the most right thing that you can do is filthy rags, but when you intentionally start doing other things, you're just covering yourself up in the same slime that King Bear was covered in. You're getting yourself further and further away than where you need to be. It amazes me how somebody can do that. Listen, I've headed down that direction in my own life. It starts with little baby steps. It starts with getting out of the Word of God, not being faithful to church, coming up with excuses with not coming to church. You have to realize what that's going to lead yourself to. Okay? We see Lot ending up over there even as a saved man. All right? What I want you to realize tonight in closing is a two vast difference here. Shirley was singing about the changes. The changes there. Some of the many changes that we have here. Look, Bera is going to say and do anything that he can to get you to come back with him. We saw that was his only priority when he spoke to Abraham, is he wanted the people. He wanted the people back, and he wanted them back then. Okay? You have to realize, though, that on this slime-covered king, we see that anytime that you're in a battle under the ownership of this king and under the direction of this king, when you're under a battle, he's going to flee you every single time. We saw that in our passage here in this verses here. Lot was loyal to this king. He lived to this king, but when the four kings came and began to attack their 5 kings and defeat them and capture them, when that battle began to take place, King Bera fled them. The king of Gomorrah also fled. You've got a king that's not going to stick by you in the hard times in your life. You've got a king that's not going to stick by you in your battles. He's going to flee and he's going to leave you every single time. The king that Melchizedek represents, we're told in Hebrews that he's after the order of the Son of God, Jesus. We're told in multiple passages that Proverbs 18:24, he's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. That's the king that Melchizedek represents. Hebrews 13, verse 5, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. That's the king that you can rest your hat on if you follow after that way and you stay after that way. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Okay? We see some of the decisions as to why even as a lost person, some people end up over here. I mentioned that that was a job that he had sitting in the gate. If you're not careful, you can choose a job or choose a career that will take you, before you know it, you're living after and serving after the king of Bera and not where you need to be. Okay? What I want you to see tonight is that there's two very distinct differences here, and that you have to make a choice. I don't read anywhere else in this passage where anybody else, of these people of Sodom, these women, these possessions, where anybody ends up in the plain of Mamre with Abraham. So even as a saved person, Lot made the wrong decision. And no doubt, Andrew, when they saw the nephew of this man that just rescued them deliver them out, when they saw his nephew go back with King Bera back to Sodom, it no doubt made their decision to go back with him all that much easier, to go back into Sodom. I mean, after all, Abraham came and got us out of this battle one time. He's rescued us one time. He'll keep coming back. Folks, your Christian friends, they may come getting you out over and over and over again, but if you're not saved, you're going to head to a place called hell. We can only get you out of this battle so many times. We're only going to bring you to this decision point so many times, and we're going to be as patient as we can. We're going to do it. One of the biggest things that the devil put in my mind to keep me from getting saved, even as a religious person, was, for whatever reason, I've heard other people say this, is from the age of 12 on up, I was in church every Sunday and Wednesday night. First time I went to church, I was probably 9 and a half, 10 years old, and even then it was just sporadic. But in my mind was, what's everybody else in the church going to think? That was the biggest thing that the devil always had in my mind. If you go down and if you get saved, you know, everybody in the church is going to be upset with you being a hypocrite. They're going to be upset with you tricking them. You know, what are they going to think? I thought that, you know, I always thought also is what's going to happen to all my friends down at school. I got saved when I was in college. I was almost 19 years old in college, and the devil would always say, you know, not only is what is the people down at church going to think about you, admitting that you're a sinner and getting saved, but what is everybody down at college going to do? You know, this crowd that follows after King Bera, what are they going to think of you? Are they going to shun you more? Because see, in my life, I tried to be as close to the crowd of Bera as I could be, while at the same time being recognized by the crowd of Melchizedek. And that's not good enough. You're going to have to realize yourself that sin. That was the biggest thing I had to do, was to realize that, and to come to the point where I could get saved. And what I found, Andrew, is when I got saved, nobody down at the church, nobody down at the church looked at me any different. In fact, they were actually happy. It was just a big lie that the King Bear was telling me that was in my mind. What I realized is that everybody down at the school, although they seemed to be my friends, I realized that as semester changes and as classes changes and as the years went by, they really weren't my friends. They went on they were all about themselves, and they were all about following after King Bear and getting further and further in that mess there. And there was no really, you do get the ridicule from time to time, but there was nothing to my extent that I thought I was going to get shunned with. Again, we know that there is some ridicule, and you're going to get that from time to time because, people can be just jerks sometimes, and they can just be lost. But it wasn't to the level that the devil had in my mind, and nothing is going to be to that level that he puts in your mind, regardless of what it is that you're doing or saying or doing, because he's just a liar. Everything that he presents to you on that side, when I taught this almost 2 years ago, I pulled a penny out of my pocket and I handed the penny to Jason on the front row, and I kind of put him on the spot, and I told Jason to look at the penny. And I said, Jason, can you tell me what the year and date is on that penny? And he said it's a 1944D. And I said, are you sure? And he looked at it again. I said, can you repeat it? And he said, 1944D. And I said, okay. I said, hey, Jason, what I just handed you is an altered coin. I said, that coin was brought into my shop sometime before that, and the lady was told by her husband that it was worth a lot. She said she put it on the counter. She put it out with some silver dollars, and she saw that my focus was drawn to the silver dollars because I looked at the penny, and I recognized immediately what it was. And she said, young man, my husband said that penny's worth more than all the silver dollars combined. And I said, no, ma'am, it's not. I said, that's an altered coin. And it broke her heart because what she thought was a 1914D. She thought she had a 1914D, and a 14D in that condition, what she put on my counter, was worth about $1,800 or worth about $800 at the time. I said, ma'am, this is an altered coin. I said, it's worth about 4 cents. It's worth the copper that's in it. You see, the devil is going to present everything to you that is a counterfeit to what Melchizedek has, to what Jesus has. It's going to look exactly the same. We're told in another passage of our Bible that King Bear is transformed into an angel of light. Although we know that this is what he is, and this is the substance of him, he has a way of looking like Melchizedek on the other side. He can make himself look like that angel. He can present everything to you that you think is real, and it's not. I've lost friends after I got saved, but I've gained more and more friends after I got saved. I've gained so much more on this side of salvation than I had when I was lost. More than what was promised to me by King Bera, those possessions that he tried to get Abraham to take. What you have to realize tonight, it doesn't matter how good or how good you think you are, how self-righteous you think you are. You've been bringing yourself to church. You've been doing what you're supposed to do, but you still don't have peace. The King of Peace is on the other side. Lot was just in a battle, and although he was just in a battle and he was just rescued, he still went back with King Bear because there was a false sense of peace with him. He's my king after all. But the King of Peace is Melchizedek, and he's the King of Righteousness. He can take you, he can impute that righteousness unto you, and he can actually give you peace that you're seeking for. And so with that, Sister Stephanie, if you don't mind coming to the piano tonight, win an invitation. We'll stand to our feet, every head bowed and every eye closed. Like I said, this lesson could go two ways tonight. Hopefully I did a good job of laying the setting out, the description out, the two kings out. And we see that Satan, he can make you a lot of promises. He can offer you everything under the world. He can offer you the goods. And no matter how good you are, you're still not going to do good enough. We know that the end result is that you're going to be covered in slime, that you're going to end up in a place that you don't want to be. We realize that as righteous as you are, it's still filthy rags. The Bible tells us that the best that you can do in Isaiah 64 verse 6 is nothing more than filthy rags, and it's nothing more than that slime. But you can be made whole tonight. There's nothing difficult. There's nothing hard. It's merely realizing that you're a sinner, that you can't do nothing to get to heaven on your own, other than put your faith and trust in Him. If you're willing to do that tonight, You can come forward now.